So, John, what have you been up to over the summer?
Oh, all manner of things, Daniel. Do you want me to go into my hobbies or what I've been doing at work?
Well, let's go into hobbies first. Are there any like projects? Have you been building anything or measuring anything or?
Building several things. I just put into the background one of them. I mean, obviously, I've done a lot of robotics projects. You'll be talking to Vishuu in a minute, who's obviously a robotics person. But if I could show you, so here's the my magic bus. So I've got a solar-powered bus, but it's purely solar. I never charge it up, so it doesn't use coal or gas or nuclear or anything like that. Those panels on the top just run it, and for every 5 minutes I drive it, it takes 10 minutes to recharge. But since I bought the bus in February, I haven't charged it up at all. So that was a nice little project. Been doing quite a few little solar projects recently, and a few new model airplanes. Of course, we do a lot of drone stuff as part of the robotics group. So we've been mapping out some red hills, and we contribute the discovery of some archaeology up East Mersey, where we found 2 burial plots, and we're now exploring a whole series of red hills. And so, yeah, it's been socially distanced, but it's still been a very productive time, and it's just really made us do slightly different things to that which we normally do. What have you been up to, Daniel?
Oh, well, not that much, I don't think. I mean, I did my garden. I made some cane furniture, like a shelf for my seedlings, because I've got a small family. Well, I hope they're small. There's probably millions of them, of field mice in my garden. And as a practicing vegan, I'm not allowed to use any sort of poisons or traps or anything, unfortunately. So I've just been trying to keep all of my delicious greens and beans and sproutings, a meter off the ground, which is difficult because they can jump about 3 foot and are phenomenally hungry. Aside from that, not much. My ant colony's going well. We've gone from 3 brood chambers to 5 brood chambers. So my little colony called Roanoke is doing okay, and the queen's all right. But yeah, apart from that, just sort of working hard and yeah, staying safe really.
Just a quick one on keeping things away from bugs and rodents and so on. Have you tried an upside down garden? They work really well. You just take an old drinks bottle, fill it up with soil, and put your tomato plant or whatever in the mouth of the bottle and hang it up on a piece of string. And the plants don't mind at all going downwards. Even things like cucumbers, the stems get thicker, so the cucumber just hangs up in the air. It's quite incredible. I discovered it by accident. I saw it in someone's garden. It just on the train. I went by and there was a tomato plant upside down. I thought that's a good idea. But it works pretty much for everything. And of course, mice can't get it because they can't climb down a bit of string.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Might be worth a go.
I'll have a think about it.
It's turned into gardener's world now.
It has, yeah. Gardener's question time. The only vertical gardening I've done and failed at doing was try to grow a pumpkin plant vertically, but obviously to swell a pumpkin you need water to travel, and they don't have great pressure. So you've got about 2-3 meters up, and by the bathroom window, and the tiniest little pumpkin about this big. So it never really made it. But oh well. Anyway, so we've gone on a bit of a ramble, which is kind of the theme of this video cast or podcast for the school, which is CSEE RambleCast. And it's, I don't know, I guess it's a kind of a conversational way, a non-email based avenue for us to just really talk about announcements, information, stuff that's useful for students to know about and for staff to know about really as well, to be honest. And an opportunity for us to have guests and experts and people who have their voice heard to talk about different things. So I think that was the main attraction to doing this.
Well, really, I mean, what's the school been up to? We've been through some quite tricky times, as you'll realise. The exam season, when that was upon us, that was just after everyone was in full lockdown due to COVID. We planned as best we could, and I think even the most optimistic amongst us wasn't terribly sure that it would have a happy outcome, but we got through the exams. We got through with minimal complaints from everyone concerned, academics, students, university staff and so on, which was quite reassuring actually. We had a look at the exam results. They're perfectly in line with that which they have been in previous years. So there were obviously concerns with, it wasn't technically open book, but I think that's the term that most people were using for the exams, that plagiarism would be rife. But we had timed exams, which made plagiarism rather difficult. We did have a few cases, but nothing particularly serious, and even the penalties for those weren't particularly serious. So the other thing which has happened inside the university is, of course, there has been major disruption to everyone, and people are going home overseas, may even have had quarantine and had to look after their families and spouses and so on. So we have made considerable allowances for things like dissertation submissions and so on. So they've been extended quite considerably. Also, if people have failed modules, we're allowing them to take those resits as first sit, so they're not capped at 40% and so on. So the university has adopted a policy of no detriment. That doesn't mean to say that we couldn't have the examination season, which some students did think that that would be a possibility, that they wouldn't need to take their exam. But the reason we had to go down that route is because we hadn't met the learning outcomes in the science subjects. The examinations are part of the learning outcomes, so unfortunately they're a necessary evil. But looking at the number of people that have sat the exams and passed the exams, we're not really in any different territory to that we were before COVID reared its ugly head. So yeah, we've just been planning most of the summer for the new term. Dual mode, I'll hand it over to you, Daniel, because you've had a lot to do with dual mode, haven't you? So
Yeah,
perhaps you'd like to define actually what that involves, because it's difficult to define.
yeah, dual mode, absolutely. So dual mode is the provision of both virtual and in-person learning, and the delivery of teaching for both of those avenues or routes for academics and teaching assistants and teaching staff to get that across to students. We are not new to dual mode. We have been in dual mode for some aspects of our school and of our provision for years. I mean, we've got degree apprentice students who learn partly with us, partly virtually, and partly in a workplace setting. We've got cohorts upon cohorts of students in Northwest University in China, who we have a flying faculty agreement with, that we ship out academics there and conduct teaching virtually, conduct assessment virtually in some cases, pre-teaching, post-teaching, all facilitated remotely. And we're kind of old hands at it. So when we did have to enhance that and make that a standard for the school, it was almost right. Well, we've got the blueprint. Let's see what we can do to, enhance Moodle, enhance all of our other virtual provisions, and bolstering all of the resources available online. I mean, truly, even an institution that only does in-person teaching, all of those resources should be, as good as they can make it anyway, really. But we've just taken it that step further, with the view that dual mode is a real thing, and both avenues need to be equitable, don't they? They need to be sort of, you can't have one advantaged over, one disadvantaged over. But I'll just take you up on your point you made about no detriment, because I think that's a really interesting point. Because if you asked me 6 months ago, no detriment, in March, I'd have gone, oh, that'll be quite difficult. I don't see how that's going to work in all cases. That might be quite complex and difficult. But now we talk about no detriment like it's the ABCs. It's obviously students aren't have no detriment because of all the things we've put in place. And I think I've got a suspicion that dual mode delivery, while to some students might sound a bit vague, or how's that going to work in practice, in 6 months from now, it will be completely second nature. It will be, assumed, completely normalized. And I think it will happen the same way that it did for for no detriment. So, I mean, that's just my opinion, but I think that's where we'll go with it.
Can I just jump in there, Danny? Can I just jump in there on some of the advantages of dual mode? Obviously, I liaise with the senior management in the university, and they dictate largely what we have to do inside the department. As soon as I learned that it was dual mode, I had certain reservations myself, as you can imagine. Firstly, defining actually what it meant. So in its simplest form, it is people learning at a distance, people learning face to face. But it's actually a lot more than that, because prior to that, for example, if a student missed a lecture or something, because all our students are good at getting out of bed at 8 o'clock in the morning, of course, but if they missed the lecture, the only real alternative they had was they would go on to Moodle, they would look at the notes, and they would go to listen again. Now, listen again with the best will in the world. If someone's making a noise, or someone's coughing, or the door goes bang, or something like that, you can miss large chunks of the material being delivered. And also, of course, when it's just audio, you don't really have a perception of being in the lecture, or the body language and so on that the academic may be delivering to the audience. But what it means under dual mode is we need to cater for people that aren't there, so there will by default be audio video recordings. So that lecture is available for everyone to not just watch once, but time and time again, should they not be able to understand something. So, for example, if you're on face-to-face, you could go to the lecture, you could watch the video, you could join in the Zoom webinars, and you could contact the academic. So you've actually got 4, well, and of course, download the material from Moodle. So you've got 5 avenues, whereas previously you only had 2. It seems fairly obvious that as time goes by, there will be a migration more and more back to campus. I have no doubt that the vaccine and so on will be on its way shortly. But at the moment, students have a choice whether they come onto campus or whether they learn remotely. And on enrolment, the students will notify the university of what their intentions are. That doesn't mean to say that they're fixed with that, because after a period of time, they can change their mind to go virtual if they want, or go face-to-face if they want. It also means that people can offset their time slightly, so they might not want to come to the UK immediately, just for 3 or 4 weeks to see if things settle down and see what's going to happen. Those options are all available to them, and all thanks to this dual mode. Now, the upshot of this, I think, is that clearly mankind carries on. Clearly COVID, we will solve it in one way, shape or form, and we will get back to normal. I have no doubt whatsoever. But will dual mode teaching stay and stick? Yeah, absolutely it will. I mean, we're not going to get away from this, and we wouldn't want to get away from this, because it is such a useful tool in doing things. It's useful to the academic because it allows them to reflect on their lectures and so on. It allows them to correct anything that they may have said or done that's wrong, which nobody's perfect, of course. And it also means that from the academic's point of view, when a student requests that, like they do now, that something is explained to them because they weren't present or they didn't understand, the obvious place to direct them in the first instance is to the video recording. So even from the academic's point of view, there's just wins all over the place. And you do start to ask yourself the question, well, why haven't all universities been doing this for a long time? And I don't have an answer to that, I'm afraid.
No, it's an interesting one.
We just didn't have a crisis. We didn't have a crisis that made us, I think, is the answer to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so we've done a lot of work, and you know, today we've talked about a lot of the new challenges. So COVID and dual mode, and accommodating that for 2020, 2021, obviously a huge challenge. But let's talk about one of the old challenges. Now, this old foe, if you like, John, has come up, you know, historically quite a lot, which is this the sort of timeliness and quality, and I guess really the value of feedback, assessment feedback to students. So being able to get something on in good enough time to be able to change your learning and identify pitfalls, peaks and troughs in your understanding, and address those in order to, you know, for your final assessment or for your exam or whatever, you're in a better position. And I know that feedback quality and feedback timeliness are issues, I mean, certainly we've grappled with for years between ourselves. But I believe we're looking to expanding a solution we already had in the pipeline pre-COVID. So I don't know if you want to take us through that at all.
Just let me rewind slightly. I mean, feedback from the point of view of students is absolutely invaluable. I don't think anyone would dispute that at all. Meaningful feedback, I think many people would dispute that. Feedback comes in more than one shape and form. It isn't necessarily a document which is a side of A4 outlining where you went right and where you went wrong. Also, you can imagine a situation where in the labs which are quite prescriptive, that it is actually difficult to give meaningful feedback when you've said, write a function that returns two values multiplied together or something. What do you actually write about that? Nice function, nice variables, it all becomes slightly meaningless after a little while. You can imagine it on a dissertation or something like that, where there is individual contribution and so on in there. But in the modules where we're just teaching the fundamentals, the type of feedback that you would expect from that is completely different to something that's open, creative, like first year, second year, and third year project. Now, the GAFA, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's generic automated feedback assistant. It is generic, isn't it? Is that what you put it down as?
Well,
Yeah,
it could be generic or guided. I had down as well, but generic works well as well.
Yeah, guided is better, I think. So we ought to stick with guided. Where did this come from? This came from me being director of education and me. I mean, Daniel, you know my office door. Well, I'm not in my office now. This is virtual. I move my head kind of set. But that's the backdrop of my office. One of the things I'm kind of famed for is I leave the door open. So if a student is even angry about something, they just come marching along and take a seat. Let's talk it through. Now, one of the things which is most contentious is, of course, this concept of, well, I didn't get the grade I wanted. So therefore, there must be some terrible injustice associated with it. And, you know, here are the marking guidelines, and I tick this box, and this box, and so on. That's fair enough. And if you have a very, very prescriptive marking criteria, you can obviously point to the various marks and see where they got those marks. What the guided automated feedback assistant does is we went out and we asked students. We asked them. We said, we're doing the marking, and obviously we're going to apply the marks, but what would you like to be marked on? So here's a piece of software that you handed in. How would you prefer us to grade it? We're not going to define the rules here. We're going to let you define what the rules are. We're still going to mark according to those criteria. So, of course, you've got the standard grading criteria. You've got fail, bare minimum pass, third, 2, 2, 3, 1, first, and exceptional first, and the barrier and the kind of boundaries that they go across. And across a number of modules that are running as trials this year, there's 10 criteria which are in there, which we're taking feedback from students what those 10 criteria are, although they've converged pretty much on the same for all modules, because students are very clear about what they want to be assessed on. For example, things like delivery and presentation of the report, perfectly fair. So that should be one of the criteria. Evidence of independent thought, surprisingly. I wouldn't have thought that would have come from students, but that's almost universal. So they do want some merit for thinking for themselves outside of the standard taught material and so on. So what an academic does is they go across, and across this grid, they'll select the grade associated with the grading criteria defined by the student. And what that will do is it will boil the whole lot up and generate a nice bit of verbatim feedback for them. So the chances of two students actually getting the same feedback are almost non-existent. And it documents quite well where the student might need to apply additional effort. So each one of those 10 criteria has another 7 criteria or grading criteria running left to right. It's then output into a file with the student's reg number, name on it, grade, and by verbatim, I just mean lots of text, of course, but lots of text explaining to them where they gained and where they lost marks. Now, the thing about that is it's defensible for the academic, because the academic can say, hand on heart, it was objectively marked, and here's how I marked it, and here's the trail which follows it. From the student's point of view, if they wish to dispute it, then they need to highlight to me which part that they're actually trying to dispute. So it's fair on both parties, and I think it's a positive step as far as the student's concerned, because they get the type of feedback that we're told by the student union that students are looking for. So
Yeah.
I do welcome students in the future to give more input onto what those grading criteria are. I think probably the most positive thing out of GAFA is the fact that we're closing the loop. So we're actually involving the student in the marking criteria, the marking measurement, and to a certain extent, we're hiding behind it, because if a student comes along and says, well, I don't want to be graded on that, well, you know, the vast majority of the other students said that they did. So basically, that's where we've gone on it.
Yeah, brilliant.
So it's been a
with the if I could
journey.
just
It started.
sorry, if I could just jump in there.
On,
So with what I really like about this, and I've never attempted, never mind submitted, a degree level piece of coursework or assessment, not even a lab script or a 2%er, nothing. But if I were to have one marked, I would want it to be as objective as possible, you know, almost. I mean, they're marked blind anyway, so they can't say, oh, that's so-and-so, I'm going to mark them down because they're so-and-so. But I'd like it to be objective. I'd like it to be transparent. I'd like to see exactly where it is that I've lost marks or gained marks or whatever. And I'd like it to be something substantial. I really wouldn't, I mean, I don't know, I've never got one or seen them, but apparently there can be sort of people who think one-liners or just a couple of sentences is really warrants, is the sort of response warranted by you know, an essay submission or a report submission. I mean, students spend a lot of time on the reports, and I think collectively, yes, academics spend a lot of time on their marking and responses, but this is a way of making an objective assessment, generating a substantial amount of feedback that is, you know, feels like, okay, I've put this much effort in, I've got this chunk back, I can work with it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, and that's a perfectly reasonable expectation. But just let me come back to what I was saying earlier, that meant many things like projects and so on. To give pay, for example, a final year C301 student, they've been at university 3 years, they've seen their supervisor an hour a week for 20, 25 weeks or whatever it is, and they've had lots of feedback. Now, to formally document it, especially as the supervisor's involved in that project themselves and they know it inside out, the whole process becomes slightly meaningless, I think, for things that are like that. And also, whilst, yes, there seems to be a demand for verbatim, for lots of text. Yeah, I can understand that. I remember handing my essays and so on in and thinking, yeah, I'd like as much as I possibly can get out of this so I can learn from the experience and so on. But just be aware it's not just in that feedback form. It's through contact and the lectures and the labs and so on. So it's multifaceted. And I do have one counterexample of lots and lots of text. You said about the one-liner. I remember the year before last, he's now 2 years ago, and he's now my PhD student, Mike Walton, who took my C721. And the feedback he got was, what can I say? And that was it. That's all I wrote on it for his feedback. Because what he turned in a 30-page report, which I could have just sent off and got published straight away. Well, I did. About 6 weeks later, we both agreed that we'd publish it. But I think it just summed it up. I didn't need to say any more. What can I say? It was equivalent to what I would have written. So there are circumstances where you get almost no feedback, but that's not negative. That's almost universally positive because you can't find anything to criticise. You know? So it can work the other way around.
No, brilliant. No, that's great. So just a little bit about what we're doing for this year is that, and John, it's my understanding that we are rolling out Gaffer school-wide, which I think is the first time anything like this has been attempted within the university. And if it is not, and if there is a reason why the module that you take as a student is not able to engage with it, or if it's a pedagogical choice that it's, you know, they're going to be marked individually and generated individually, that's fine. But there will be other feedback moderation processes in place. So essentially, this Gaffer will be a baseline, an assumed baseline, and then anything else, you know, for people who aren't taking us up on the offer of it, will be have processes in place and moderation of feedback, checking, signing off, and that sort of mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Not everyone has to use it. It's not a compulsion. But I think once people do start using it, well, I mean, obviously we have used it in trials. And, it was used in Northwest. It's been used C155, C721. There was a limited trial on 204, I think. It works. It works. The academics are happy with it, and the students, we get, well, I don't like using the word complaints, but we don't get any negative feedback from students about it. So clearly it's there, and clearly they're involved in the chain. And at the end of it, if they're not happy with one or two criteria in there, in other words, they don't want to be graded on what colour is the sky when it's databases kind of course, then that's fine. They feed it back to us and we get the marking criteria change.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, brilliant. So now if we come on to, so we've got a guest, John. We've got a guest on today that you alluded to.
Celebrity as well.
Yeah, world famous, renowned celebrity, world expert is Dr. Vishuu Mohan, who is one of our lecturers in robotics, I believe, Vishuu?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah.
Nice. So we just wanted to have you on because, I mean, one of the flashiest things about our school and the different studies and remits is robotics. It looks really cool. It's in sci-fi and culture, and it just permeates through the idea of, you know, cutting edge technology and that sort of thing. And visually, they're very impressive. But I just wanted to know, and maybe John, you've got an answer to this as well, but Vishuu first. What's your favorite robot, either real or from fiction or culture, or what's your favorite robot, Vishuu?
Well, I have many favorite robots, but I mean, it's more of a wish what I would like to have. So I would like to have a robot which had the object recognition capabilities of a 3-year-old child, language understanding capability of a 4-year-old child, the dexterity of a 5-year-old child, and the social intelligence of a 6-year-old child. That's amazing what children do, 2 years to 3 years, amazing. And I just wish one day we had robots which could have at least that level of intelligence when the entire world is speaking about general purpose AI and these kind of things.
Yeah.
That's kind of the wish. And in terms of real, I mean, I would say the robot which we have been designing and building at Essex, which is the Beast, and some students are already working on it, and many others will get the opportunity to work on it. I would rate it among the top 5 state-of-the-art robotic platforms in the world in terms of its sensing, manipulation, navigation capabilities. So it's a good opportunity to play around with some really expensive toys. Yes.
So with the Beast, I mean, what is the day job of the Beast? What do they do 9 to 5? Or
the Beast has to basically it's been designed to pick strawberries. Okay. Let me just. How do I share the? Not share.
I might be able to make you a host.
No. I wanted to. I wanted to put the change the background. Where is it?
Oh, so it should be under video. There's a where it says stop video. There's a little arrow.
Yeah, got it. Choose virtual background. Is that?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. So, yeah. Earlier you were. Can you see the changed background now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. See strawberries. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So earlier John was mentioning the vertical growing, you know. So this is the present vertical growing system at Tiptree Farms. If probably some of you might have seen in the news that the government has launched the Pick for Britain campaign now, because in the COVID time there is a big shortage of human pickers in the farm, picking strawberry, tomato, number of things. So the beast's daily job, what it is supposed to do is automate this kind of harvesting tasks, which are very laborious, repetitive, and the financial reward is very less. So even humans do not want to do this kind of laborious task, picking asparagus, picking strawberries. So the daily day-to-day job is to do this kind of things, but also it's a platform to study complex manipulation and sensing, because these are really challenging tasks. So it's both sides, understanding human dexterity and also developing applied platforms which have impact on the real ground.
If I can ask, why strawberries? I mean, they seem to me like the most difficult, squishy, variable. You know, how to tell it's ripe. Like it seems like you've gone for the most difficult one. Is there a reason?
One of the reason is the proximity of Tiptree, and they are the country's first vertical farming grower. So with it allows us to do real world experiments, but we also do a number of things with other plants like lettuce. We've started working with wheat, but strawberry is kind of the stress test, or the if someone can crack strawberry, then other plants are much easier. The soft deformable nature as well as perishable nature makes it really tough, and they come in very complex clusters. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a stress test for the system.
Wow, amazing. John, just quickly, I mean, apart from the Beast, which is obviously number one, do you have a second favorite robot, either in
Number
history?
one, of course.
Number one.
My sixth favorite. Yeah, well, I think you already know this one, but I asked the viewers to look up Lost in Space, and what you've got in Lost in Space is a robot called Robbie, which by modern standards looks like one of those things that you see outside a vacuum cleaner shop, where people make robots out of parts from vacuum cleaners and old exhaust pipes and things like that. But to me, it's the quintessential robot. It really is. It doesn't have legs. It just goes about on wheels. It makes all the appropriate noises and so on. So, yep, Robbie the robot, no doubt about it.
Yeah, even recently there was in a hospital, I think in Italy, they did something really interesting. So you know that we have the Roomba which cleans the house. So someone put a tripod on a Roomba and attached a smartphone on a tripod. It can do excellent monitoring. You can have an app which can detect objects. It can navigate. It can move. It can sense. What a simple idea, you know. A Roomba, a tripod, and a smartphone with some app running on it, and it can really do interesting things. It can monitor the ward in the hospital, detect patients. That's all. I mean, it's fun. I mean, so
amazing. With
I mean, robot. I was just about to say, Danny, robots don't necessarily have to be things that wander about the floor. I mean, I've got a whole variety of them in here in the form of drones, ROVs, so underwater rovers. I'm halfway through building what we call the solar hopper, which is really a duplication of the robot which is on Mars, which has to autonomously decide for itself when to take off and when to land. But it's powered purely by solar, so there's no batteries and absolutely no reason why it shouldn't carry on indefinitely. And while we're at it, I would also plug another little thing I've been working on for a number of years now, which is the machine that lives forever. So in other words, a perpetual machine that doesn't have any batteries. So what that has is it has a little brain inside, a microcontroller, that's basically run from a supercapacitor and it energy harvests. So I've got one just over the other side there. I won't show you, it's a bit tacky at the moment, but that's been live for 2 years and it just runs from the light which is in my workshop. And it just computes prime numbers. That's all it's done. That's its sole job. it spends most of its time asleep, but when it does wake up, it's got some energy, it does some number crunching, and then it goes back to sleep. Now, despite the fact it doesn't move, it doesn't make any noises, it's still a robot, it's still a machine, it's still a very complicated machine.
Wow.
So, yeah, robots are everywhere.
Yeah,
In your washing machine.
I guess it's difficult to, because when I think of robots, I'm a completely not non-technical person as well. So anyone watching from last year will know that, given my our revision cast videos. But when I think of a robot, I think of an android. I think of Data from Star Trek, and so that's sort of a robotic, mechanically robotic body. But I think when we actually talk about robotics, a lot of people think artificial intelligence, because you've got to have, you know, what's the Latin phrase, not to go all fancy schmancy, but deus ex machina, the ghost in the machine. So I guess artificial intelligence is the ghost and robotics is the machine, sort of, and together they create this mythical sci-fi android that everyone loves the idea of, or is terrified of the idea of. But yeah, I guess, I mean, artificial intelligence, surely there's an element of that in the beast, is there, Vishu? Like, it's got to think to some capacity, doesn't it?
Not before going to think, I would use the word learn.
Okay.
Because most striking feature of any intelligent system is its ability to learn, and only learning can then allow the system to deal with unpredictability and dynamics of the complex world. So learn comes first, and then think is one step ahead. So yeah, that's where AI comes in, you know. To a completely mechanical body, if you can enable a system to learn and grow, that's where the capabilities then grow up. Or you use experience to go beyond experience, to counteract all the challenges and unknown novelty which you will face. And the same with the students, they have to learn to grow, right?
Wow. No, very good. Good plug there for, you know, progress monitoring, engagement monitoring. That's good. Amazing. So we've kind of touched on robots in COVID secure society in the COVID era. And you say the beast sort of addresses some of those with, you know, difficulties in recruitment for, you know, fruit picking and that sort of thing. Are there any other innovations or ideas that you're aware of, you know?
It's been a very interesting year for robotics, not only me, but many other colleagues. And COVID has kind of opened up the field. I mean, it's amazing. So one of the applications which is very straightforward is sanitization of public spaces and public transport, because these are high risk, high touch surfaces. So we have just submitted a project with NHS and a bus company and the ambulances, so the robot can automatically sanitize these kind of spaces. But one interesting thing which I want to tell about it is the interdisciplinarity of it, which is, I had never heard the word environment microbiologists. Okay, these are people who detect microbes, viruses in the environment. So if the robot could collect a swab or a sample from the surface, then these people can then analyze and tell how contaminated the surface is. Because otherwise I cannot see the virus. So it's just open loop. I just spray like the guy in the supermarket is spraying a disinfectant. But so it opens up collaboration with people whom you would have never imagined you would collaborate before the COVID era. Similarly, sandwich making industry. The distance between two humans in a sandwich making industry is 50 centimeters. No longer possible with social distancing. And now there is a huge demand for sandwiches from NHS. They have lost business from the flight. So again, complex picking, placing, assembly of sandwiches. And the most interesting request which I received recently was to remove hair from pigs.
Oh, okay.
In abattoirs. So because in abattoirs, frozen conditions difficult. So there was a company which was in touch because it's still done by humans, you know. Can you not put a blowtorch on a robotic arm? And every carcass is different. And because international regulations, you should not have any hair on the nails, and you know. So it's so strange. Go on, John.
You do know that. You do know Daniel's a vegan and I'm a vegetarian, don't you?
I am also vegetarian. Yeah, I am vegetarian. So yeah, it's mean, we are thinking of a solution for this, but yeah, I mean, it's been very, very interesting for robotics, and even the government has launched the Pick for Britain campaign. So some of these difficult tasks which robots are not yet there and interesting for research is all really opening up during this time. So very, very exciting time.
If I like, because we could talk about this forever, because I'm
Yeah.
fascinated, and to have two experts on it is, you know, I'm in the middle of an academic sandwich at the moment, so I'm sort of, you know, hearing it from both sides, which is brilliant. So one of the things, just to bring us back to sort of the school and Essex, Vishu, one of your, well, several, but one of your teaching and supervision remits is CE 301.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you just wanted to outline sort of one or two sentences about what it's like, and if any final years are watching us or listening to us, then, you know, what the rough outline for the year is, what we know so far, you know, or keep it a surprise if you want to. I mean,
No, I mean, C 301 is the most important module in the degree scheme because it is a 45 credit module, accounts for 23% of the whole degree marks. It is also one of the most interesting because it is where students get the opportunity to put to practice what they have learned in all the other modules over the last 2 years. So it's the open-ended nature of this module. So they have to take ownership of their project.
I just refer to, because they refer to 301 as the capstone. Capstone's a funny terminology for it. I use the word masterpiece because when you went out and you got a job as a tradesman, a skilled tradesman, at the end of it, everyone did a masterpiece. So if you're a bricklayer, you build a particular arch. If you're a carpenter, you would build a particular cabinet or something like that. So back, 80, 100 years ago, when people were living in these ways, it was a masterpiece, and that's what it is in the degree scheme. So the final year project is your masterpiece. It's demonstrating all of your skills all in one. And yeah, Fishy, back
Yes,
to you.
thank you. So yeah, I mean, and I remember my final year dissertation even now, and everyone will. So it's something which is very close to the heart, you know. So if they do a good job, they will remember it forever. And last year we've had really amazing projects. There was a Basildon Council app which was launched by the council on the World Environment Day just a couple of months back. There are some robotic experiments which are already being used in the hospitals. So yeah, I mean, students do really amazing work, and they are in the driving seat. And we kind of take a supporting role, and yeah, it's a fun module, and we also have many other workshops which we conduct with external people. There are two virtual workshops, conferences which will happen. So yeah, I mean, there are some more new things which we will do for the project open day and things like that,
yeah.
which they know soon. But yeah,
Fishy, I would just add to that almost certainly the project that you take is going to, in some way, shape, or form, shape your career, because
yeah,
when you go along to your employer and they understand your degree schemes, they understand BSCs, they understand BNs and so on, they can ask you, what would you find with your project? And, if it's closely related to what they're doing, they're going to be quite impressed by that. So always try and frame up because the Vishu offers hundreds of different projects, always try and frame up what you opt for as what you want to do for a career, and
yeah,
that will stand you in very good stead.
yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Vishu. That's been really interesting, and also valuable to let our final years know sort of the gravity of 301 and it coming up and how significant it is, because I think they can't really be overstated at this point. But to really enjoy it, I guess, because it is a sort of wide-ranging, free reign to really embrace it and go with where their curiosity goes as well. Brilliant. So thank you so much for joining us. If anyone listening or watching wants to pose any questions to us or wants to appear on CSEE RambleCast, feel free to email us at the Project Worker inbox, which is projectworkercsee@essex.ac.uk. or if you find John or I on the address book and email us directly, I'm sure we won't mind finding out that way. But yeah, thank you so much, and we hope to be back soon with another episode of CSEE RambleCast. So thanks for watching.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much.